The massive German Shepherd's teeth gleamed like knives through the steel bars as 12-year-old Ethan Sullivan stepped forward, his worn sneakers scraping against the concrete. Colonel Harrison Montgomery III's bourbon glass shattered on the ground. "That's impossible. No one can touch that devil dog." The crowd of 200 gasped as Kaiser, Montana's most vicious K9, pressed his scarred muzzle gently against the chain-link fence where Ethan's trembling palm waited. Women screamed, men stumbled backward, champagne flutes crashing onto the manicured lawn. Ellen Sullivan clutched her oxygen tank with bone-white knuckles, remembering how her son James used to whistle that same soft tune Ethan now hummed. 5 years ago, before the bullets, before the funeral. "The boy's done it," Frank Rodriguez shouted, his weathered face pale. "Mother of God, he's actually done it." How did an orphan child tame the untamable? And why was Harrison Montgomery's hand moving toward the pistol beneath his jacket? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. The Riverside Ranch sprawled across 50,000 acres of Montana wilderness, its boundaries marked by the jagged peaks of the Rockies to the west and the endless prairie grass to the east. In the summer of 1995, it stood as a monument to 3 generations of Montgomery power, where cattle barons had built their empire on sweat, blood, and secrets buried deeper than any well. Ethan Sullivan lived in a rotting shack on the edge of that empire, a place the ranch hands called Sullivan's Shame. 2 rooms with a leaking roof and walls so thin you could hear the coyotes breathing outside. At 12 years old, he'd already buried both parents and carried responsibilities that would break grown men. His father, Officer James Sullivan, had died in a shootout 5 years ago, leaving behind a grieving widow who followed him to the grave within 6 months. Now only Ethan and his grandmother Ellen remained, clinging to each other like driftwood after a shipwreck. Ellen Sullivan, 70 years old and fading fast, spent her days in a haze of oxygen treatments and memories that slipped away like smoke. The Alzheimer's had started gentle, stealing names and dates. But lately it had turned cruel, erasing entire decades. Sometimes she called Ethan by his father's name. Sometimes she didn't recognize him at all. But even in her confusion, she never forgot the medical bills that arrived like clockwork, each envelope another nail in their coffin. Kaiser had arrived at Riverside Ranch 3 years ago, already branded a killer. The massive German Shepherd, 90 pounds of muscle and scars, had once been the pride of the Montana State Police K9 unit. Badge number K9237, Officer Sullivan's partner, trained to track, attack, and protect. But something had broken inside him the night of the shootout. The official report mentioned psychological trauma and irreversible aggression, but the truth ran deeper than any veterinary assessment could measure. Harrison Montgomery III had purchased Kaiser for $500 from James Sullivan's desperate widow, a fraction of the dog's $50,000 value. It was Harrison's way, finding people at their lowest point and squeezing until they broke. At 52, he ruled Riverside Ranch with the same iron fist his father had used, believing fear and money could solve any problem. His wife Margaret moved through their mansion like a ghost, covering bruises with expensive makeup. Their daughter Sarah, 16 and full of teenage rebellion, had started carrying a camcorder everywhere, documenting truths her father preferred hidden. Frank Rodriguez had worked the ranch for 23 years, long enough to know which secrets to keep and which ones ate you alive from the inside. As foreman, he'd seen Harrison transform from an ambitious young man into something harder and meaner. He'd also known James Sullivan, remembered the young officer's dedication to justice, his gentleness with his son, his partnership with Kaiser. Frank knew things about the night James died that he'd never spoken aloud. secrets that gnawed at him during sleepless nights when the Montana wind howled like accusing voices. The 4th of July celebration at Riverside Ranch had become Montana high society's most anticipated event, where politicians shook hands with cattle barons and million-dollar deals were sealed over bourbon and barbecue. This year, 200 of the state's most powerful people gathered under a massive white tent, their laughter carrying across the prairie like the promise of prosperity. Harrison Montgomery III stood at the center of it all, his Stetson tilted at the perfect angle, bourbon flowing as freely as his boasts about the ranch's record profits. The afternoon sun had pushed the temperature past 90, and Harrison's face glowed red from heat and alcohol. He'd been drinking since noon, each glass making him louder, meaner, more desperate to prove he was still the big man everyone feared. "You see that kennel over there?" Harrison's voice boomed across the party, his arms sweeping toward the reinforced steel structure 50 yards from the tent. "That's where I keep the devil himself, Kaiser, meanest son of a bitch on 4 legs. 3 professional trainers in the hospital, 2 lawsuits settled out of court, and 1 veterinarian who won't come within 100 feet of my property." The crowd murmured appreciatively, some edging away from the kennel's direction. They'd all heard the stories. Jim Patterson still walked with a limp from his encounter 6 months ago. Mike Reeves had needed 47 stitches. The last trainer, a woman from Billings who specialized in aggressive dogs, had lasted exactly 30 seconds before Kaiser's teeth found her forearm. Ethan Sullivan wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the party. He'd been cleaning the horse stables since dawn, moving like a shadow through his daily chores, invisible labor that kept the ranch running while the rich played. But the water line to the kennels had burst, and Frank Rodriguez had sent him to shut off the valve before the whole area flooded. "Well, well, well." Harrison's predator eyes locked onto the boy. "Look what we have here. The orphan boy thinks he belongs with civilized people." 200 heads turned. Ethan froze, his hand still on the valve, dirty water soaking through his already threadbare jeans. In his faded flannel shirt and duct-taped sneakers, he looked like something that had crawled out of a Depression-era photograph. "That's the Sullivan boy," someone whispered. "Father was that cop who died." "Lives in that shack by the eastern fence," another added. "Him and that crazy old woman." Harrison stumbled forward, bourbon sloshing from his crystal tumbler. "Tell me something, boy. You ever think about what your daddy would say? Seeing you clean up after your betters? James Sullivan, big-shot police officer, and his son's nothing but a stable boy." Ethan's green eyes flashed, but he kept his mouth shut. He'd learned long ago that words were weapons in Harrison Montgomery's hands, and silence was his only shield. But Harrison wasn't done. The alcohol had loosened something vicious inside him, something that needed to hurt, to dominate, to prove he was still the king of his domain. "You know what? I'm feeling generous, patriotic even. It's Independence Day, and every American deserves a chance at the American dream, right?" The crowd laughed nervously. Margaret Montgomery touched her husband's arm, a gentle warning he shook off like an annoying fly. Sarah raised her camcorder, a sixth sense telling her something significant was about to happen. "Here's the deal, stable boy," Harrison's voice carried across the entire gathering. "You see that demon in there? You go touch that dog, just touch him, and I'll give you this whole ranch, every acre, every cow, every blessed blade of grass." The laughter stopped. Senator Williams nearly choked on his champagne. Judge Carter's eyes widened behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "Harrison!" Frank Rodriguez stepped forward. "That's not—" "Shut up, Frank!" Harrison spun around, nearly losing his balance. "This is between me and the boy. What do you say, Ethan Sullivan? You touch Kaiser, the ranch is yours. But when that dog tears you apart, and he will, you and that senile grandmother of yours pack up and get off my land forever. Deal?" Ethan looked at the kennel. Through the reinforced bars, he could see Kaiser pacing, a massive shadow of muscle and fury. The German Shepherd's reputation wasn't exaggeration. Everyone knew the stories. Everyone had seen the scars on those who'd tried. But Ethan saw something else, in the way Kaiser favored his right hip, in the pattern of scars across his muzzle, in the particular way his ears moved when he heard certain sounds. "Are you certain about this, sir?" Ethan's voice was steady, older than his 12 years. "Absolutely." Harrison pounded his chest like a silverback gorilla. 200 witnesses right here, but you won't even get within 10 feet before—" Ethan was already walking. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, creating a corridor between the boy and the kennel. Someone dropped a glass. Someone else whispered a prayer. Margaret Montgomery's face had gone pale beneath her perfect makeup. Kaiser heard him coming. The pacing stopped. A low growl rumbled from the kennel, the sound of death given voice. The German Shepherd moved to the front of the enclosure, lips pulled back to reveal teeth that had tasted blood. Ethan stopped 30 feet away and did something no one expected. He sat down in the dirt. "Hey, Kaiser," he said softly, his voice carrying in the sudden stillness. "You probably don't remember me. I was a lot smaller last time we met. But I remember you." The growling intensified. Kaiser's hackles rose, making him appear even larger, more threatening. Several people in the crowd stepped back involuntarily. "My dad used to bring me to the station," Ethan continued, still sitting in the dirt like he was having a conversation with an old friend. "You'd let me throw tennis balls for you in the training yard. You were different then, happier, before that night, before everything went wrong." Something shifted in Kaiser's posture. The growling faltered, just for a second. Ethan reached into his pocket slowly, carefully, and pulled out something small, a brass whistle on a faded leather cord. "Dad gave me this when I was 7. Said it was yours and his. Said it meant partnership, trust, family." He brought the whistle to his lips and blew a single, clear note. The transformation was instantaneous. Kaiser's ears shot forward. His tail, which had been rigid with aggression, gave a single, uncertain wag. The growling stopped entirely. "That's impossible," Harrison breathed. Ethan stood up, keeping his movement slow and deliberate. He walked forward, each step measured and calm, 20 feet, 15, 10. Kaiser watched him approach, no longer the devil dog of legend, but something else, something broken, recognizing another broken soul. At the fence, Ethan extended his hand, palm flat against the chain link. Kaiser moved forward and pressed his scarred muzzle against the fence, exactly where Ethan's hand waited. A soft whine escaped the dog's throat, not aggression but recognition, longing, pain. The crowd erupted. Women screamed, men shouted. Glasses shattered on the ground. Harrison Montgomery's face went from red to white to purple in the span of 3 seconds. That's cheating. He had help. The whistle." "You said touch the dog," Judge Carter interrupted, his legal mind already parsing the implications. "The boy touched the dog. 200 witnesses saw it." "But the deal's not done," Harrison's voice cracked with desperation. "Touching through a fence doesn't count. If the boy wants my ranch, he needs to prove he can really handle that animal. 30 days. He has 30 days to fully train Kaiser, or the original deal stands. They leave forever." Ethan turned from the kennel, his young face set with determination. In that moment, everyone saw not a 12-year-old stable boy, but something else. His father's son, perhaps, or maybe just someone who'd found his destiny in the most unlikely place. "I accept," Ethan said simply. 30 days. The morning of day 6 started like any other, with Ethan rising at 4 a.m. to begin his rounds. The Montana sky was still black, stars fading as the first hint of dawn touched the eastern horizon. He'd made progress with Kaiser. The dog now allowed him to enter the kennel, even accepted food from his hand. But full training seemed impossibly far away. Ellen was making breakfast when it happened. One moment she was standing at the rusty stove, humming an old hymn while scrambling their last 3 eggs. The next, the spatula clattered to the floor as her left side went slack, her face drooping like melted wax. "Grandma!" Ethan caught her before she hit the ground, her frail body suddenly dead weight in his arms. Her eyes rolled back, showing only whites, and a strand of saliva escaped the corner of her mouth. The ambulance took 43 minutes to arrive, an eternity in rural Montana. By the time they reached Riverside General, Ellen's left side was completely paralyzed, her speech reduced to garbled syllables that might have been Ethan's name or might have been nothing at all. "Stroke," Dr. Melissa Harper confirmed, her eyes kind but honest above her surgical mask. "A significant one. The next 72 hours are critical. She'll need round-the-clock monitoring, possibly surgery if the swelling doesn't reduce." "How much?" Ethan asked, because in America that was always the question that mattered most. Dr. Harper's expression tightened. "ICU care runs about $10,000 a day. Surgery, if needed, starts at $50,000. Does she have insurance?" Ethan's silence was answer enough. Back at the ranch, word of Ellen's stroke spread quickly. Frank Rodriguez found Ethan sitting outside Kaiser's kennel that evening, tears cutting tracks through the dirt on his face. "I'm sorry about your grandmother, son," Frank said, lowering himself onto an overturned bucket. "But there's something you need to know. About Kaiser, about your father." The story came out in pieces, like shrapnel being carefully extracted from old wounds. Kaiser hadn't just been James Sullivan's K-9 partner, he'd been family. James had raised him from a pup, trained him with methods passed down from his own father, who'd been a military dog handler in Vietnam. "Your dad brought Kaiser home every weekend," Frank continued. "You were probably too young to remember clearly, but that dog loved you something fierce. Used to sleep under your crib when you were a baby." "Then why—" Ethan's voice cracked. "Why is he like this now?" Frank pulled out his phone, a flip model that seemed ancient even in 1995, and showed Ethan a video file someone had sent him anonymously. The grainy security footage showed Harrison in the kennel after midnight, a cattle prod in one hand, a bottle of whiskey in the other. Kaiser cowered in the corner as Harrison struck him repeatedly, laughing when the dog yelped. "This is from last month," Frank said quietly. "But I suspect it's been going on since Harrison bought him. You see, Kaiser wasn't aggressive that night your father died. He was trying to protect someone. And Harrison was there that night, Ethan, at the shootout." The blood drained from Ethan's face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe it's time someone looked closer at what really happened to your father." Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of footsteps. Sarah Montgomery emerged from the shadows, her ever-present camcorder hanging from a strap around her neck. At 16, she had her mother's delicate features, but her father's stubborn jaw, though she'd die before anyone told her that. "I heard about your grandmother," she said, not quite meeting Ethan's eyes. "I'm sorry." "Your father will be happy," Ethan replied bitterly. "Makes it easier to run us off." Sarah bit her lip, then seemed to make a decision. "My father's a monster," she said simply, "and I can prove it." She pulled a manila envelope from her bag, hand shaking slightly as she passed it over. Inside were medical records, not Ellen's, but Margaret Montgomery's, hospital visits dating back 15 years. Broken ribs explained away as riding accidents, black eyes hidden behind sunglasses. A miscarriage after being accidentally pushed down the stairs. "Mom won't leave him," Sarah's voice was hollow. "Says it would destroy the family name, but maybe if you win this bet, things could change." "Why are you helping me?" Ethan asked. Sarah's laugh was bitter as winter wind. "Because I've been recording everything, every beating, every drunken rage. Every time he's hurt someone who couldn't fight back. I've got 60 hours of footage hidden where he'll never find it. But no one will care about a rich man hitting his wife. Now, a rich man who killed a cop. That's different." The revelation sent Ethan reeling, but there was no time to process it. Kaiser had begun pacing in his kennel, agitated by something. Then Ethan smelled it too. Smoke. "Fire!" Frank's voice rang out across the ranch. "The east hayfield's burning." They ran toward the blaze, finding a wall of flames consuming the dry summer grass, racing toward the wooden outbuildings. Ranch hands scrambled with hoses and shovels, but the fire was spreading faster than they could contain it. "The wind's pushing it toward the kennels," someone shouted. Ethan's heart stopped. Kaiser was locked in a steel cage with no way to escape. Without thinking, he sprinted toward the kennel, ignoring the shouts behind him. The smoke was thickening, making his eyes stream and his lungs burn. He could hear Kaiser barking frantically, throwing himself against the bars. The lock was hot to the touch, but Ethan forced his fingers to work, fumbling with the mechanism as embers rained down around him. Finally, the door swung open, and 90 pounds of panicked German Shepherd burst out. But instead of running, Kaiser spun around, grabbed Ethan's shirt in his teeth, and dragged him away from the kennel just as a burning beam crashed down where they'd been standing. They stumbled to safety together, Ethan coughing up black phlegm while Kaiser pressed against his side, whining softly. When Ethan looked up, he saw Harrison watching from the main house porch, a strange expression on his face. Disappointment mixed with something else. Fear. Later, after the fire was contained and the damage assessed, Dr. Karen Walsh arrived to check the animals for smoke inhalation. The veterinarian was a tall woman with prematurely gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Ethan," she said quietly while examining Kaiser, "can I show you something?" She guided his hand to Kaiser's right hip, pressing gently. Ethan felt it immediately. Hard fragments under the skin, pieces of metal that shouldn't be there. "Shrapnel," Dr. Walsh confirmed. "From a police-issue bullet, if I had to guess. It's been there for years, probably causing constant pain. That's why he's been so aggressive. He's been hurting every single day." "Can you remove it?" "I could, but—" She glanced around nervously. "Harrison specifically told me never to treat Kaiser beyond basic care. Said he wanted the dog to stay mean." "Please," Ethan begged. "I'll find a way to pay you." Dr. Walsh studied him for a long moment. "Your father was a good man," she said finally. "He helped my daughter once, when she was in trouble. Consider this repaying a debt." The surgery took place that night in Dr. Walsh's mobile clinic away from prying eyes. She removed 17 pieces of shrapnel from Kaiser's hip and leg, each fragment carefully preserved in evidence bags. "Some of these are from standard police rounds," she observed. "But others, these are from a .45 caliber. Police don't carry .45s. Ethan knew who did, though. Harrison Montgomery's custom Colt .45 was famous throughout the county, passed down from his father, supposedly used to kill 100 rattlesnakes. When Kaiser woke from the anesthesia, something had changed. The constant tension in his body had eased. His eyes, while still wary, no longer held that edge of pain-fueled rage. "Hey, buddy," Ethan whispered, stroking the dog's head. "Feeling better?" Kaiser's tail gave a weak thump, the first truly happy gesture he'd made in 5 years. But their moment of peace was shattered by Frank's arrival. His face was grim, hat clutched in weathered hands. "Ethan," he said heavily, I just came from the hospital. Your grandmother, she's taken a turn for the worse. They're saying she might not make it through the night." The world tilted sideways. Ethan gripped Kaiser's fur, feeling the dog press closer in response. 24 days left to win an impossible bet. A grandmother dying in a hospital he couldn't afford, a father's murder to prove, and somewhere in the main house, Harrison Montgomery was probably pouring another bourbon, confident that everything was going according to plan. But Harrison had made one crucial mistake. He'd given Ethan something to fight for. And now, with Kaiser by his side and the truth slowly emerging from the shadows, the stable boy was becoming something else entirely. A threat. The early morning training sessions became Ethan's sanctuary, a world where only he and Kaiser existed in the purple pre-dawn light. Day 7 began with Montana's sky painted in shades of rose and gold, the air crisp enough to see their breath as boy and dog worked through the obstacles Frank had helped set up in the old corral. "Heel," Ethan commanded softly, and Kaiser moved into position with fluid grace, his powerful body now free from the constant agony of embedded shrapnel. The transformation was remarkable. Where once there had been only rage and pain, now there was focus, intelligence, and something that might have been hope. They worked through the basic commands James Sullivan had once taught, each successful completion bringing back fragments of memory. Ethan remembered being 4 years old, watching his father put Kaiser through his paces in their backyard. The way his dad's face lit up with pride when Kaiser executed a perfect takedown. The special whistle commands that were their secret language. "Down," Ethan said, and Kaiser dropped instantly, belly to the dirt, dark eyes never leaving Ethan's face. "Stay!" Ethan walked backwards, increasing the distance between them. 20 feet, 50, 100. Kaiser remained motionless, a statue of loyalty carved from muscle and devotion, but their peaceful mourning was shattered by the arrival of a black town car, dust billowing behind it like an omen. Richard Thornton stepped out. Harrison's personal attorney, a man who'd never lost a case and never found a law he couldn't bend. "Mr. Sullivan," Thornton's voice was smooth as snake oil, "I'm here to inform you that the property you're currently occupying is being condemned. You have 48 hours to vacate." Ethan's hands clenched into fists. "You can't do that. We have a lease." "Had a lease," Thornton corrected, producing a sheaf of papers, "which was contingent upon maintaining the property to habitable standards. Our inspector found numerous violations: black mold, structural damage, rodent infestation." "That's bull," Ethan caught himself. "We've lived there for 5 years." "Then you've been endangering your grandmother's health for 5 years." Thornton smiled thinly. "Frankly, given her current medical condition, some might consider it elder abuse." The threat was clear. Fight the eviction, and they'd try to take Ellen away from him entirely. Ethan felt the world closing in, options disappearing like morning mist. Kaiser must have sensed his distress because the dog moved closer, pressing against Ethan's leg with a soft whine. Thornton took an involuntary step back. "I'd keep that animal under control if I were you," the lawyer said. "One incident, just one, and Mr. Montgomery will have grounds to terminate your little wager immediately." After Thornton left, Ethan slumped against the corral fence, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he faced. 23 days left, no home, a dying grandmother, hospital bills climbing toward $200,000. And now they were threatening to take Ellen away. "Don't let him see you break," Sarah's voice came from behind him. She was dressed for school but had detoured to the kennels, her omnipresent camcorder recording everything. "That's what he wants. That's what he always wants." "Your father's going to win," Ethan said hollowly. "He always wins." "Not always," Sarah said fiercely. She pulled out a second memory card from her camera bag. "I've been documenting everything. The fire yesterday. I have footage of Marcus Briggs setting it with a gas can. Dad's enforcer isn't as careful as he thinks." Ethan's head snapped up. "That's arson. We could..." "Could what?" "Go to Sheriff Coleman. He's been in my father's pocket for 20 years. The FBI, they need more than one fire to care." Sarah's laugh was bitter. "But I'm building a case. Every crime, every payoff, every beating. When I have enough, when I'm 18 and he can't touch me anymore, I'm going to bury him." "That's 2 years away. I need help now." Sarah bit her lip, then made a decision. "There's something else. About the night your father died. I was only 11, but I remember Dad coming home covered in blood. Not injured. Someone else's blood. Mom made him burn his clothes in the fireplace." The revelation hit Ethan like a physical blow. He'd always been told his father died in a routine drug bust gone wrong. 3 suspects, all killed at the scene. Case closed. But if Harrison had been there... Their conversation was interrupted by Frank Rodriguez, who arrived with a thermos of coffee and a grim expression. "Ethan, we need to talk about money." "I know it's not my business, but..." "Ellen needs surgery," Ethan interrupted. "The swelling in her brain isn't going down. They want $50,000 just to start, and that's not counting the ICU charges that are adding up every day." Frank pulled out a checkbook, weathered hands trembling slightly. "I've got about $8,000 saved. It's yours." "Frank, I can't..." "Your daddy saved my nephew from a drug dealer once. Never asked for anything in return. This is me paying that forward." He wrote the check and pressed it into Ethan's hand. "But $8,000 won't go far. You need real money." "Or a miracle," Sarah added. The miracle came from an unexpected source. That afternoon, while Ethan was working Kaiser through advanced protection drills, Margaret Montgomery appeared at the corral. Harrison's wife rarely ventured to this part of the ranch, preferring to stay in the climate-controlled safety of the main house. Up close, Ethan could see what Sarah's videos had only hinted at. The careful makeup couldn't quite hide the yellowing bruise along her jawline. The way she held her left arm suggested ribs that hadn't properly healed. But her eyes, brown like Sarah's, held a determination that reminded him of her daughter. "I hear your grandmother needs surgery," Margaret said without preamble. She pulled an envelope from her purse. "There's $60,000 here, cash, untraceable." Ethan stared at the envelope like it might bite him. "Why would you?" "Because 20 years ago, Ellen Sullivan was the only person in this town who was kind to me." Margaret's voice was steady but soft. "When I first married Harrison, when I realized what I'd gotten myself into, she found me crying behind the grocery store. She didn't know me, but she sat with me for an hour, held my hand, told me I was stronger than I knew. Mrs. Montgomery, take it." She pressed the envelope into his hands. "God knows Harrison has taken enough from your family. Let me give something back." As she turned to leave, she paused. "Be careful, Ethan. My husband is planning something. I don't know what, but he's been making calls to Chicago. Whatever happens, don't trust anyone new who shows up in the next few days." The warning proved prophetic. Day 10 brought a convoy of pickup trucks filled with hard-faced men who claimed to be cattle inspectors, but looked more like enforcers from a crime movie. They set up camp near the main barns, their presence a clear threat. But Ethan had bigger concerns. The combination of Frank's money and Margaret's secret gift had bought Ellen her surgery, and he spent every moment he could at the hospital. The operation was scheduled for day 12, giving him precious little time to continue Kaiser's training. Dr. Walsh proved invaluable during this period. She volunteered to work with Kaiser while Ethan was at the hospital, using her veterinary knowledge to understand the dog's behavioral patterns. "He's not aggressive by nature," she told Ethan one evening. "Every violent reaction is actually defensive. He's protecting something, or someone. The trick is teaching him to recognize real threats versus perceived ones. They developed a system. Ethan would give commands, and Dr. Walsh would play the role of various scenarios: friendly stranger, aggressive threat, someone in need of help. Kaiser learned to differentiate, to assess rather than simply attack. The breakthrough came on day 15. They were practicing in the far pasture when one of Harrison's new inspectors approached, clearly intending to provoke an incident. The man, built like a brick wall with prison tattoos creeping up his neck, pulled out a cattle prod, the same type Harrison had used in the video. Kaiser's entire body went rigid. A growl rumbled from deep in his chest, lips pulling back to reveal those formidable teeth. This was it, the test. If Kaiser attacked unprovoked, the bet was over. "Easy," Ethan said quietly, not moving from his position 30 feet away. "Kaiser, assess." It was a command they'd been working on, teaching Kaiser to evaluate before acting. The dog's ears swiveled, his nose working to process scents. The growling continued, but he held his position. The enforcer stepped closer, electricity crackling from the prod. "Come on, doggy. Show everyone what a killer you are." "Kaiser." Ethan's voice cut through the tension. "Defend." The command was specific. Not attack, but defend. Kaiser moved like lightning, but instead of going for the throat as everyone expected, he targeted the weapon. His jaws clamped down on the prod, yanking it from the man's hand and crushing it between his teeth. Then he placed himself between the enforcer and Ethan, standing guard, but not attacking. "Son of a—" The enforcer reached for something in his jacket, but Frank's voice stopped him cold. "I think real careful about your next move, friend." The foreman stood 20 feet away, a shotgun cradled casually in his arms. "See, we got laws about self-defense in Montana, and everyone here saw you threaten that boy with a weapon." The enforcer backed away, hands visible, muttering curses. But the damage was done, or rather, wasn't done. Kaiser had shown restraint, intelligence, and protective instinct, without unnecessary violence. It was exactly what Ethan needed to prove. Sarah caught it all on camera, of course. That night, she showed Ethan footage she'd been collecting of the inspectors, close-ups of faces, license plates, even some audio she'd captured with a directional microphone. "2 of them have arrest records," she said, scrolling through files on her laptop. "Armed robbery, assault, drug trafficking. These aren't cattle inspectors. They're muscle from Chicago. Dad's really scared of losing this bet." "Good," Ethan said grimly. "He should be." Days 16 through 20 became a blur of intensive training and hospital visits. Ellen's surgery had been successful, but she remained in a medically induced coma while her brain healed. Ethan split his time between her bedside and the ranch, pushing himself and Kaiser to their limits. The dog's transformation was remarkable. From the snarling beast in the kennel, he'd become a disciplined, responsive partner. They worked on everything: basic obedience, advanced protection work, scent tracking, even the specialized commands James Sullivan had developed for police work. "Your father would be proud," Frank said one evening, watching Kaiser execute a perfect building search pattern. "That's academy-level work right there." But their progress hadn't gone unnoticed. On day 21, Ethan woke to find a note slipped under the shack's door. "Stop now, or your grandmother won't wake up." The threat sent ice through his veins. He raced to the hospital, bursting into Ellen's room to find her exactly as he'd left her, stable, healing, but still unconscious. The nurses assured him no one unusual had been near her room, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. "They're getting desperate," Dr. Walsh said when he told her about the threat. She'd become a regular presence, checking on Kaiser and offering support. Harrison knows you might actually win this, but threatening a comatose old woman? That's low even for him. Dr. Walsh's expression darkened. I've been doing some research about the night your father died. The official report doesn't match the medical evidence. She pulled out a file, copies of autopsy reports, ballistics data, crime scene photos. 3 suspects, all supposedly killed by police rounds. But look at these wound patterns. 2 of them were shot with a .45 caliber weapon. Police don't carry .45s. Harrison does, Ethan said quietly. Exactly. And there's more. Your father's backup weapon was never found. His personal radio was damaged, struck by a bullet. Someone didn't want him calling for help. The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture Ethan didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. His father hadn't died in a random shootout. He'd been murdered, and Harrison Montgomery had pulled the trigger. Day 23 brought another crisis. Ethan arrived at the ranch to find yellow tape across the shack's door and Sheriff Coleman's cruiser parked outside. "Building's been condemned," Coleman said, not meeting Ethan's eyes. "Unsafe for human habitation. You can't stay here anymore." "Where am I supposed to go?" Coleman shrugged. "Not my problem. But you can't stay on ranch property without Mr. Montgomery's permission, and I'm guessing that's not forthcoming." Ethan was now officially homeless. He couldn't afford a motel, couldn't leave Kaiser, couldn't abandon his training with only 7 days left. He spent that night in the barn with Kaiser, the dog's warm body pressed against his side, both of them outcasts seeking comfort in each other. Sarah found them there the next morning, bringing coffee and breakfast sandwiches. "This is insane," she said, watching Ethan wolf down the food. "You're homeless, your grandmother's in a coma, and you're still trying to win this bet?" "What choice do I have?" Ethan asked. "If I give up now, Harrison wins. He gets away with murder, literally, and Ellen and I lose everything." "There might be another way," Sarah said slowly. She pulled out a flash drive. "I've been copying files from Dad's computer, financial records, correspondence, even some recorded phone calls. There's enough here to interest the FBI, but what? But it also implicates Mom. Some of the money laundering went through accounts in her name. If I release this, she could go to prison too." The moral dilemma hung between them. Justice for James Sullivan versus protecting an abused woman who'd shown kindness. Truth versus consequences. Ethan understood why Sarah had waited so long to act. "We'll find another way," he said finally. "Your mom doesn't deserve to pay for your father's crimes." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, the first time Ethan had seen her cry. "Thank you," she whispered. Day 24 brought a storm, both literal and figurative. The Weather Service issued warnings about a severe system moving in from Canada, expected to hit on day 28. But the more immediate storm was Harrison's escalating campaign of intimidation. The inspectors had become more aggressive, following Ethan everywhere, making threats both subtle and explicit. One morning he found a photo of Ellen in her hospital bed tucked under Kaiser's collar, a clear message that they could reach her any time they wanted. But Kaiser had become more than just a bet to win. The bond between boy and dog had deepened into something profound. They moved together like dance partners, each anticipating the other's actions. When Ethan was stressed, Kaiser would rest his massive head on the boy's lap. When Kaiser grew anxious during thunderstorms, a remnant of his trauma, Ethan would sing the same lullabies his father had once sung to him. "You know," Frank said, watching them work, "I've seen a lot of dog handler teams in my time. Police, military, civilian, but I've never seen anything like what you two have. It's like you're reading each other's minds." It wasn't mind reading, Ethan knew. It was trust, complete, absolute trust, born from shared pain and mutual healing. Kaiser had learned to trust again, and in teaching him, Ethan had found his own strength. On day 25, Dr. Walsh made a disturbing discovery. While reviewing Kaiser's medical history, she found discrepancies in the dates. "According to Harrison's purchase records, he bought Kaiser 3 days after your father's death," she said. "But these veterinary records show Kaiser being treated for injuries at a clinic in Billings 5 days before the shooting. Injuries consistent with being in a fight. So either someone's lying about dates or Kaiser was injured before the shootout. Which raises the question, what was Harrison doing with your father's K9 partner before your father died?" The implication was staggering. Had Harrison somehow taken Kaiser before the shooting, used the dog to lure James Sullivan into a trap? The thought made Ethan sick, but it also made terrible sense. His father would have responded to a call about Kaiser without backup, without hesitation. That night, unable to sleep, Ethan sat with Kaiser under the stars. The storm was building on the horizon, lightning flickering in the distance like artillery fire. In 5 days, everything would be decided. Either he'd prove Kaiser could be controlled, or he'd lose everything. "We're going to win," he told Kaiser, who lifted his head at the sound of his voice. "We have to. For Dad, for Ellen, for everyone. Harrison's hurt." Kaiser's tail thumped against the ground. Agreement, or maybe just contentment at being together. In the distance, thunder rolled across the Montana plains, and Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the real storm hadn't even begun. Day 28 arrived with apocalyptic skies. The storm that had been building for days finally crashed into Montana with the fury of divine judgment. By noon, winds were gusting at 70 miles per hour, turning ranch debris into projectiles. Rain fell in sheets so thick, visibility dropped to mere yards. Harrison Montgomery stood at his office window, bourbon in hand despite the early hour, watching his empire bend under nature's assault. The weather seemed fitting, chaos to match the chaos in his mind. In 2 days, a 12-year-old boy might take everything he'd built. The thought burned worse than the whiskey. "Sir?" Marcus Briggs entered without knocking, water streaming from his jacket. "The crew from Chicago wants to know if we're still moving forward with the plan." "Of course we are," Harrison snarled. "I don't care if God himself shows up. That boy doesn't win." "Not now. Not ever." Meanwhile, in the barn where Ethan had taken shelter with Kaiser, Sarah burst through the doors, her camcorder wrapped in plastic, her face pale with urgency. "They're going to kill Kaiser," she gasped, fighting for breath. "I heard Dad on the phone. During the test, when everyone's watching you, Marcus is going to shoot Kaiser and claim the dog attacked someone. Dad's already got Dr. Coleman ready to write a report saying the dog was rabid." Ethan's blood turned to ice. It was brilliant in its simplicity. Kill Kaiser, claim public safety, end the bet with no winner. Harrison keeps his ranch, and Ethan loses everything, including the only family he had left besides Ellen. "We have to stop them," Ethan said. "With what army?" Sarah asked. "Dad owns the sheriff, the mayor, half the county commissioners. Who's going to listen to us?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Margaret Montgomery appeared in the barn doorway, soaked to the bone but standing straighter than Ethan had ever seen her. "I'll stop them," she said quietly. 20 years of being Harrison's punching bag is enough. It ends now." She pulled out a manila envelope, hands steady despite the magnitude of what she was doing. "Ethan, your father was investigating Harrison for drug trafficking. He'd connected Harrison to a Mexican cartel moving product through the ranch. The night he died, he was coming to arrest my husband." "Mom," Sarah breathed. "You knew?" Margaret's composure cracked slightly. "I've known for 5 years. I've been gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment. Your father didn't just kill James Sullivan. He killed Officers Martinez and Williams, too, then staged it to look like a gang shootout." She handed Ethan the envelope. Inside were photographs, financial records, even a blood-stained shirt hidden in Harrison's private safe. The evidence was overwhelming, damning, and exactly what they needed. "Why now?" Ethan asked. Margaret touched the fresh bruise on her jaw. "Because last night he told me his plan for Kaiser, and I realized if he could murder an innocent animal just to win a bet, there was no line he wouldn't cross. Next time it might be Sarah, or me, or you." Thunder crashed overhead, shaking the barn walls. Through the doors they could see ranch hands struggling to secure equipment against the storm, but the real tempest was about to break inside the Montgomery family. "I need to make a call," Margaret said, pulling out a cell phone. "Not to the local police. Harrison owns them. To the FBI field office in Billings. Agent Patricia Chen has been waiting for someone inside to turn." As Margaret made the call that would destroy her husband, Frank Rodriguez arrived with urgent news. "The storm's getting worse," he reported. "Weather Service says possible tornadoes." "We need to move the test inside, maybe the main arena?" "That's what Harrison wants," Sarah realized. "Contained space, easier to control the situation, easier to claim Kaiser suddenly went crazy." Ethan looked at Kaiser, who sat alertly beside him, seemingly unbothered by the storm. The dog had faced bullets, beatings, and betrayal. He'd survived pain that would have broken most creatures. Now, in their darkest hour, Ethan knew what they had to do. "We're not hiding," he said. "Tomorrow, we face Harrison on his terms. But we'll be ready." The FBI arrived faster than anyone expected. By evening, unmarked cars filled with federal agents had surrounded the ranch. Agent Chen, a small woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind, took Margaret's evidence and immediately issued warrants, but Harrison had vanished. "He must have been tipped off," Agent Chen said, frustration evident. "We've got roadblocks up, but in this storm—" Day 29 dawned with the storm at its peak. The test had been moved to 2 p.m., but with Harrison missing and federal agents swarming the ranch, everything was in chaos. Ethan spent the morning with Kaiser, running through their routines one last time, trying to stay focused despite the uncertainty. At noon, Ellen woke up. The call came just as Ethan was preparing to leave for the arena. Dr. Harper's voice was thick with emotion. "She's asking for you, Ethan. She's weak, but she's conscious and coherent." Ethan was torn. The test was in 2 hours, but Ellen needed him. In the end, Kaiser made the decision, nudging Ethan toward Frank's truck with a soft whine. "Go," Frank said. "I'll watch Kaiser. Your grandmother needs you more than we do right now." The hospital was in emergency mode due to the storm, but they rushed Ethan to Ellen's room. She looked tiny in the hospital bed, her skin paper-thin and pale, but her eyes were bright and aware. "My brave boy," she whispered when she saw him. Her hand, cold and frail, found his. "I've been having the strangest dreams. Your father was there. He said he's proud of you." "Grandma," Ethan's voice broke. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you're here because of me." "Hush." Ellen's grip tightened with surprising strength. "You listen to me, Ethan James Sullivan. You've done nothing wrong. You've stood up to a bully, protected the innocent, shown courage most grown men don't have. That's the Sullivan way." She paused, gathering strength. "There's something I need to tell you. About Harrison. He's my son." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. "What?" "I was 17. Working as a maid for the Montgomery family. Harrison's father forced himself on me. When I got pregnant, they paid me to disappear, to never tell Harrison who his real mother was. They raised him as their own, told him his mother was some society woman who died in childbirth." Tears tracked down her weathered cheeks. "I watched my baby grow up from afar, watched him become cruel like his father. When he killed your daddy, it was my son killing my grandson's father. The circle of pain just keeps spinning. Why didn't you ever tell anyone? Who would believe the help over the Montgomerys? Besides, I thought maybe someday Harrison would change, would become the man I'd hoped he'd be. But some poison runs too deep. She squeezed his hand again. Promise me something. When this is over, however it ends, don't let hatred consume you. Your father wouldn't want that. I don't want that. I promise, Grandma. Good boy. Now go. Go show them all what we're made of. Ethan kissed her forehead and ran for the door, but Ellen's voice stopped him. Ethan, tell Kaiser. Tell him Jim would be proud of him too. The ride back to the ranch was treacherous. Trees were down across roads, forcing detours. The storm had intensified, with reports of funnel clouds spotted near Billings, but inside Ethan's heart, a different storm was raging. Harrison was his uncle, the man who'd killed his father, who'd tormented Kaiser, who'd made their lives hell, was family. They arrived at the arena to find pandemonium. The test had been delayed due to Harrison's absence, but the crowd was growing restless. Judge Carter and Senator Williams were arguing with Agent Chen about jurisdiction. The Chicago enforcers had vanished like smoke, and in the middle of it all stood Kaiser, magnificent and calm, waiting for his partner. "Where have you been?" Sarah rushed over, her camera capturing everything. "Dad's here. He snuck in through the old mine entrance. He's in the arena, demanding the test go forward." "Let him," Ethan said quietly. "It's time to end this." The arena was packed despite the storm. Word had spread about the FBI raid, about Harrison's crimes, about the impossible bet that had started it all. What had begun as entertainment for the wealthy had become something else, a reckoning. Harrison stood in the center of the arena, looking haggard but defiant. His clothes were muddy, his face unshaven, but his eyes burned with the same arrogance that had defined him for 52 years. "Well?" he shouted over the storm. "Are we doing this or not? I want my ranch back." Judge Carter stepped forward. "Mr. Montgomery, you're under federal arrest warrant." "After," Harrison snarled. "After the bet is settled, I gave my word in front of witnesses. Either the boy completes the test or he admits defeat. Then you can arrest me." Agent Chen looked ready to intervene, but Margaret touched her arm. "Let it happen," she said. "Let everyone see who he really is." Ethan entered the arena with Kaiser at his side. The dog's coat was soaked from the rain, but his bearing was proud, alert. They took their position at one end while 3 professional K9 evaluators brought in from Wyoming to ensure impartiality prepared their scorecards. "The test is simple," Judge Carter announced, his voice carrying over the wind. "Ethan Sullivan must demonstrate complete control over the dog Kaiser through a series of standard obedience and protection exercises. Any sign of unprovoked aggression or failure to follow commands will result in failure." "Get on with it," Harrison shouted. The first test was basic obedience: heel, sit, stay, down, come. Kaiser performed each command flawlessly, his focus never wavering despite the chaos around them. The crowd murmured appreciatively. Next came intermediate work: retrieving objects, navigating obstacles, responding to hand signals without verbal commands. Again, Kaiser was perfect, moving with the fluid grace of a well-oiled machine. But Ethan knew the real test was coming: protection work. The most dangerous part, where Harrison would make his move. The evaluator in charge, a stern woman named Captain Brooks, called for a volunteer to play an aggressor. Before anyone could respond, Harrison stepped forward. "I'll do it," he said, pulling on the padded suit. "After all, if the dog's really trained, it shouldn't matter who the aggressor is, right?" Ethan's heart sank. This was the trap. Harrison would provoke Kaiser, push him to the breaking point, create an incident that would end everything. "That's highly irregular," Captain Brooks began. "I insist." Harrison's smile was predatory. "Unless the boy's afraid." "We'll do it," Ethan said quietly. The protection demonstration began standardly enough. Harrison, in the padded suit, approached threateningly. Ethan gave the warning command, and Kaiser barked once, sharp and clear. Harrison was supposed to stop, but he kept coming. "Kaiser, defend!" Ethan commanded. The dog launched forward, grabbing Harrison's padded arm in a textbook takedown. But Harrison had a surprise, a cattle prod hidden in his other hand, the same type he'd used to torture Kaiser for years. The crack of electricity split the air. Kaiser yelped, his body convulsing, but his training held. Instead of attacking in rage, he released Harrison's arm and retreated to Ethan's side, whimpering but obedient. "Again!" Harrison shouted, advancing with the prod. "Let's see how much the mutt can take." That's when Ethan saw it. Harrison's other hand moving toward a concealed pocket. The shape was unmistakable. A gun. Time slowed. Harrison's hand closed on the weapon. His eyes met Ethan's, and in them was nothing but hate. The crowd began screaming, scattering. But they'd underestimated Kaiser. The moment Harrison's gun cleared the pocket, Kaiser moved. Not in rage, not in vengeance, but with the precise training of a police dog protecting his handler. He hit Harrison at full speed, 90 pounds of muscle and determination. The gun flew from Harrison's hand, skittering across the wet ground. "Aus!" Ethan commanded. "Release." Kaiser immediately let go, backing away from the fallen man. Harrison lay in the mud, defeated not by violence, but by the very control he'd claimed didn't exist. FBI agents swarmed the arena, weapons drawn. Harrison was cuffed, Miranda rights reading, competing with thunder. But the test wasn't over. "Is that sufficient?" Ethan asked Captain Brooks, his voice steady despite his racing heart. The evaluator looked at her colleagues, then at the scorecards that were somehow still dry in the storm. "Mr. Sullivan, I've been evaluating police and military dogs for 20 years. What I just witnessed, a dog maintaining discipline even under electrical torture and mortal threat, is the highest level of training I've ever seen. You've not just passed, you've set a new standard." The crowd erupted. Despite the storm, despite the danger, people were cheering, crying, embracing. Justice had come to Riverside Ranch at last. But for Ethan, the victory felt hollow. As they led Harrison away, his uncle turned back one last time. Their eyes met across the muddy arena, and Ethan saw not a monster, but a broken man who'd chosen darkness over light, cruelty over kindness, pride over love. "Tell my mother," Harrison said quietly, his words almost lost in the storm. "Tell her I'm sorry." Then he was gone, swallowed by the rain and the future that awaited him in federal prison. Ethan stood in the center of the arena, Kaiser pressed against his side, and felt the weight of victory settle on his young shoulders. He owned Riverside Ranch now. But more than that, he owned the responsibility to be better than those who came before, to break the cycle of pain Ellen had spoken of, to honor his father's memory, not through vengeance, but through justice. The storm was passing, the winds beginning to calm. Through a break in the clouds, a single ray of sunlight pierced the gloom, illuminating boy and dog in golden light. They had won. But the real work was just beginning. The aftermath of Harrison's arrest felt like walking through a graveyard of dreams. Ethan stood in the empty arena as FBI agents cataloged evidence, their systematic movements a stark contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. Kaiser remained at his side, the dog's fur still damp from rain and sweat, occasionally whimpering from the electrical burns hidden beneath his thick coat. "We need to get him to Dr. Walsh," Sarah said, appearing at Ethan's elbow. Her camcorder hung limply at her side, finally silent after capturing the most dramatic footage of her life. Those burns could get infected. But Ethan couldn't move. The magnitude of what had just happened, what was still happening, paralyzed him. He owned Riverside Ranch. At 12 years old, he was suddenly responsible for 50,000 acres, 300 employees, and a legacy built on blood and lies. "Ethan," Margaret Montgomery's voice was soft but insistent. She looked older than her 45 years, but also somehow lighter, as if Harrison's arrest had lifted a physical weight from her shoulders. "There's something else you need to know, about your grandmother." The words sent ice through his veins. She's stable," Margaret quickly assured him. "But while you were here, she had another episode. The doctors, they're saying she needs immediate surgery. Tonight, the storm damaged the hospital's main generator and they're running on backup power. They can only maintain life support systems. If she's going to have the surgery, it has to be now," Ethan finished. The cruel irony wasn't lost on him. Winning the ranch meant nothing if he lost Ellen. "I'll drive you," Frank offered. But Ethan shook his head. "I need you to stay here. Deal with the FBI, the lawyers, the ranch hands who don't know if they'll have jobs tomorrow." He looked at Kaiser, torn between responsibilities. "And someone needs to get Kaiser to Dr. Walsh." "I'll take him," Sarah volunteered immediately. "Mom and I both will. Go. Be with your grandmother." The drive to the hospital was treacherous. Storm debris littered the roads, fallen trees, twisted metal that might have been roofing or signs, abandoned vehicles. Ethan navigated Frank's truck through the obstacle course while his mind raced through everything Ellen had told him. Harrison was her son, his uncle. The man who'd murdered his father was his own blood. The hospital parking lot was chaos. The storm had brought casualties from across the county. Car accidents, collapsed buildings, people struck by flying debris. Ethan had to park 3 blocks away and run through knee-deep water to reach the entrance. Inside, emergency lighting cast everything in harsh shadows. He found Ellen in pre-op, looking impossibly small on the gurney. Dr. Harper stood nearby, reviewing charts by flashlight. "The backup generator can maintain power for maybe 6 more hours," she explained without preamble. "Your grandmother needs this surgery now, or we'll have to transfer her to Billings. In her condition, she wouldn't survive the journey." "Do it," Ethan said immediately. "Whatever it takes." Ellen's eyes fluttered open at his voice. "My brave boy," she whispered. "Did you win?" "Yeah, Grandma. We won." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Your father would be so proud." "Kaiser?" "He's safe. Sarah's taking him to the vet." "Good." Her hand found his, grip weak but determined. "Ethan, listen. What I told you about Harrison, I need you to understand. I gave him up because I had no choice. But I never stopped loving him. Never stopped hoping he'd become better than his raising. Grandma, save your strength." "No." Her voice gained urgency. "You need to hear this. Harrison chose his path, but you have the same choice now. You can let bitterness poison you, or you can be better. The ranch is yours now. What you do with it, that's your choice." The orderlies arrived to take her to surgery. Ethan walked alongside the gurney as far as they'd allow, Ellen's hand in his until the last possible moment. "I love you, Grandma." "Love you too, baby. Take care of our Kaiser." Then she was gone, wheeled through doors marked authorized personnel only, leaving Ethan alone in a corridor that smelled of antiseptic and fear. The surgery was scheduled to take 4 hours. Ethan found himself in the chapel, a small room with uncomfortable pews and a cross that seemed to glow in the emergency lighting. He wasn't particularly religious, hadn't been since his parents' funeral, but something drew him there. He wasn't alone. A familiar figure sat in the front pew, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "Mr. Rodriguez?" Frank turned, his weathered face streaked with tears. "Ethan. Shouldn't be here." "Should be at the ranch, like you asked." "What's wrong?" Frank struggled for composure. "It's my fault. All of it. Your daddy's death, Kaiser's pain, your suffering. Mine's the fault." The confession came in broken pieces. Frank had known about Harrison's drug operation, had kept quiet out of fear for his family. The night James Sullivan died, Frank had been forced at gunpoint to make the call that lured him to the ambush. "Harrison knew your daddy was close to exposing everything," Frank wept. "Said if I didn't make that call, he'd kill my daughter and granddaughters. Made it sound like a routine backup request. Your daddy came alone because he trusted me, and I let him die." Ethan felt the chapel spin around him. Another betrayal. Another person he'd trusted who'd been part of the web of lies. "I've lived with it for 5 years," Frank continued. "Watched you grow up without a father. Watched Ellen fade away from grief. Kept my mouth shut like a coward. But seeing you today standing up to Harrison with more courage than I ever had, I can't carry it anymore." "Did you pull the trigger?" "No, but did you want my father dead?" "God, no. Jim was the best man I ever knew." Ethan closed his eyes, hearing Ellen's words echo in his mind. "Choose to be better. Break the cycle." "Then I forgive you," he said quietly. Frank's sob was wrenched from the depths of his soul. "How can you—" "Because my grandmother is in surgery right now, fighting for her life. Because holding on to hate won't bring my father back. Because you've spent 5 years in your own prison and that's punishment enough." Ethan stood, suddenly feeling older than his 12 years. "But you need to tell the FBI everything. No more secrets. No more lies." "I will," Frank promised. "I'll tell them everything." They sat together in silence until Ethan's phone rang. Sarah's number. "Kaiser's okay," she said immediately. "Dr. Walsh treated the burns." "Minor tissue damage, but he'll heal. But Ethan, there's something else. The FBI found bodies." "Bodies?" "Under the old barn, the one that burned down 3 years ago. They think there might be a dozen or more, people who crossed Harrison over the years." The weight of Riverside Ranch's dark history pressed down on Ethan's shoulders. How many secrets were buried in that soil? How many families had lost loved ones to Harrison's greed? "There's more," Sarah continued. "Mom's been going through Dad's files. She found references to someone called the Witness, someone who saw Dad kill your father but disappeared that night. The FBI thinks they might still be alive." A witness. Someone who could provide closure, who could ensure Harrison never walked free again. "Ethan?" Dr. Harper's voice cut through his thoughts. He spun around to find her standing in the chapel doorway, still in surgical scrubs. "Is she—" "The surgery was successful, Dr." Harper smiled tiredly. "Your grandmother is a fighter. She's in recovery now. You can see her in about an hour." Relief flooded through him so powerfully his knees nearly buckled. Frank steadied him with a strong hand. "Thank you," Ethan managed. "Thank you so much." Dr. Harper's expression grew serious. "She's not out of the woods yet. The next 24 hours are critical. But I'm optimistic. She has something to live for." Her eyes softened. "She has you." An hour later, Ethan sat beside Ellen's bed in the recovery room. She looked fragile, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed, but her chest rose and fell steadily, alive, fighting. His phone buzzed, a text from Margaret. Harrison confessed to everything. Your father, the others, all of it. He's going away for life. The ranch is yours, free and clear. What you do with it now is up to you. Ethan looked at his grandmother, at the woman who'd raised him after losing everything, who'd loved the son that had been torn from her and still found room in her heart for forgiveness. He knew what he had to do. "We're going to make it right, Grandma," he whispered, taking her hand. "All of it. The ranch is going to help people instead of hurt them. We're going to honor Dad's memory, and we're going to take care of Kaiser and each other. I promise." Outside, the storm had finally broken. Through the window, stars appeared between racing clouds, and for the first time in days, maybe years, Ethan felt something that might have been hope. The truth, when it finally emerged, came from the last place anyone expected. 3 days after Harrison's arrest, while Ethan was juggling ranch operations and hospital visits, a letter arrived at the sheriff's office. It was addressed simply, "To the boy who saved Kaiser." Sheriff Coleman, now under federal oversight and desperate to prove he hadn't been completely corrupt, personally delivered it to Ethan at the hospital. Ellen was stable, but still unconscious, machines maintaining her fragile hold on life. "This came through our mail system," Coleman said, unable to meet Ethan's eyes. "Postmarked from Colorado. No return address, but I think you'll want to read it." Ethan opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a handwritten letter and a small key. "Dear Ethan, my name is Maria Santos. For 5 years I've been the ghost everyone's been looking for. I was there the night your father died. I saw everything. I was 19, pregnant, desperate. Harrison had promised me money to carry drugs across the border. I was hiding in the warehouse when your father arrived. He wasn't supposed to be there. Harrison had told me the place would be empty. I watched Harrison shoot Officer Martinez first, then Williams. Your father tried to call for backup, but Harrison shot the radio out of his hand. They fought. Your father was winning until Harrison whistled for Kaiser. The dog was confused, torn between masters. In that moment of hesitation, Harrison shot your father in the back. I ran. I've been running ever since. But I couldn't run from what I saw in the news, a brave boy standing up to the man who took everything from him. You did what I was too cowardly to do. You fought back. The key is for a safety deposit box at First National Bank in Billings, Box 447. Inside is my video testimony, recorded that night on a camera I found in the warehouse. I've been too scared to come forward, but you've shown me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what's right despite the fear. I'm turning myself into the FBI today. It's time for the truth to come out. All of it. Your father died trying to save me. He saw a scared, pregnant girl and tried to protect her, even though I was breaking the law. That's the kind of man he was. That's the kind of man you're becoming. Tell Kaiser I'm sorry. He lost his partner because of my choices. But maybe now we can all finally heal. Maria Santos. Ethan read the letter 3 times before the words truly sank in. A witness, video evidence. The final nail in Harrison's coffin, but more than that, closure. Answers to questions that had haunted him for 5 years. "I need to get to Billings," he told Coleman. "I'll drive you myself," the sheriff offered. "It's the least I can do." They made the 2-hour drive in relative silence, Coleman occasionally clearing his throat as if to speak before thinking better of it. The bank was closed, but Coleman's badge got them access. The manager, a nervous man who kept adjusting his tie, led them to the safety deposit boxes. Inside box 447 was a small digital camera, the kind that had been cutting edge in 1990. Ethan powered it on with shaking hands. The battery was dead, but the memory card was intact. "We need to get this to the FBI. Coleman said. "Chain of custody." "No," Ethan interrupted. "I need to see it first. I need to know." They found an electronics store, still open, bought a card reader, and huddled in Coleman's cruiser as the video loaded on Ethan's phone. The quality was grainy, the audio tinny, but it was all there. Every horrible second of the truth. His father's voice, calm and authoritative. "Harrison, put the weapon down." "It's over." Harrison's laugh, drunk on power and paranoia. "Nothing's over until I say it is." The sounds of gunfire, his father's voice calling for Kaiser, trying to use their bond to stop the violence. Harrison's whistle, the same command whistle Ethan had found in his father's effects. The confusion in Kaiser's whine as he tried to choose between his handler and the man who'd been tormenting him. And then the final shot, his father falling. Harrison standing over him, saying words that would haunt Ethan forever. "Should have minded your own business, Jim. Now your boy's gonna grow up just another orphan trash like his grandmother." Ethan was sobbing by the time the video ended. Coleman was crying too, this man who'd looked the other way for 20 years, finally confronting the monster he'd helped create. "I'm sorry," Coleman whispered. "God help me, I'm so sorry." They drove straight to the FBI field office where Agent Chen was waiting. Maria Santos had indeed turned herself in that morning, providing her own testimony that corroborated every detail in the video. "This changes everything," Agent Chen said after viewing the evidence. "With this, Harrison will never see daylight again. But Ethan, there's something else you need to know. We've been investigating Harrison's finances. The ranch, it's in debt, massive debt. Harrison was using it to launder cartel money, taking loans against the property. You might inherit the land, but you also inherit nearly $30 million in obligations. $30 million. The number was so large it felt abstract, unreal. "So I could lose it anyway," Ethan said numbly. "There might be a way," Agent Chen continued. "The federal asset forfeiture from Harrison's drug money, plus the RICO violations, you could petition for those funds to be used to clear the ranch's debts." "It's complicated, but given the circumstances, you being a victim of Harrison's crimes, it could work." "How long would that take?" "Months, maybe years. In the meantime, you'd need to keep the ranch operational, pay the workers, maintain the livestock." It seemed impossible. He was 12 years old. How could he possibly manage a 50,000-acre ranch while fighting legal battles and caring for his grandmother? The answer came from an unexpected source. When Ethan returned to the hospital that evening, he found the waiting room full of people: Frank Rodriguez, Sarah and Margaret Montgomery, Dr. Walsh, and dozens of ranch hands he'd worked alongside for years. "What's going on?" he asked. Frank stood, hat in hand. "We heard about the debts, about what you're facing, and we decided something." He gestured to the assembled crowd. "This ranch has been our home, some of us for decades. We're not letting Harrison destroy it from a prison cell." Margaret stepped forward. "I've already contacted my lawyers. I'm filing for divorce and claiming my share of the estate, which I'm immediately gifting to you. It won't cover everything, but it's a start." "The workers have agreed to reduced wages until the ranch is stable," Frank added. "And I've got savings. Not much, but enough to help with operating costs." "Why?" Ethan asked, overwhelmed. "Why would you all do this?" "Because you showed us something," one of the ranch hands said. "Showed us it's possible to stand up to bullies, to do what's right even when it's hard." Sarah raised her camcorder. "And because I've been documenting everything. The world's watching now. Started a GoFundMe. We're already at $200,000. Turns out people love a story about a kid and his dog taking down corruption." Through all of this, Kaiser had been recovering at Dr. Walsh's clinic. That night, after the revelations and the promises of help, Ethan finally reunited with him. The German shepherd's tail went wild when he saw Ethan, nearly knocking the boy over in his enthusiasm. "Hey, buddy," Ethan murmured, burying his face in Kaiser's fur. "We got him. We got the man who hurt us both." Kaiser whined softly, then did something he'd never done before. He rolled onto his back, exposing his belly, the ultimate sign of trust from a dog who'd learned the hard way that trust could mean pain. "I know," Ethan whispered. "I trust you too." That night, as Ethan sat vigil at Ellen's bedside with Kaiser curled at his feet, he thought about cycles, about pain passed down through generations like a cursed inheritance. Harrison had been born from violence, raised in privilege built on cruelty, and had continued the pattern until it consumed him. But cycles could be broken. Pain could be transformed into purpose. A ranch built on blood could become a place of healing. "We're going to make it right, Dad," Ethan whispered to the darkness. "All of it." "I promise." And in the morning, when Ellen finally opened her eyes to find her grandson and Kaiser keeping watch, her smile was answer enough. They were broken, all of them. But broken pieces, as Ethan had learned, sometimes fit together in ways that made them stronger than they'd ever been whole. 6 months later, the morning sun painted Riverside Ranch in shades of gold and promise. Ethan stood on the hill overlooking the property, Kaiser sitting alertly beside him, as they watched the transformation taking shape below. Where once fear had ruled, now hope was taking root. The main house, which had harbored so much darkness, had been converted into the James Sullivan Memorial Center for at-risk youth. 23 teenagers from broken homes across Montana now called it home, learning not just ranching skills but discovering their own worth. Each morning they worked with the horses and cattle. Each afternoon they attended classes. Each evening they trained with the German shepherds that Dr. Walsh had helped rescue from similar situations as Kaiser. "He's ready," Sarah said, approaching with her ever-present camera. At 16 and a half, she'd become the ranch's official documentarian, her YouTube channel Redemption Ranch drawing millions of views and crucial donations. Your speech, I mean. Everyone's gathering. Today marked the official opening of the K9 program, where rescued German shepherds would be paired with veterans suffering from PTSD. It was Ellen's idea, born from watching Kaiser's own healing journey. Ellen herself sat in a wheelchair near the podium, still frail but fiercely proud. The stroke had taken much of her mobility but none of her spirit. She wore her best dress, the one she'd been saving for Ethan's high school graduation, and her eyes sparkled with tears she refused to shed. "You ready for this, partner?" Ethan asked Kaiser, who responded with a soft woof. The dog had become a certified therapy animal, spending his days between the youth center and the local VA hospital. His transformation from the devil dog to a healer had inspired the entire program. The crowd was larger than expected. Ranch hands mixed with city officials, veterans stood beside troubled teens, and FBI agents chatted with local farmers. Agent Chen had flown in specially, bringing news that the asset forfeiture had been approved. Riverside Ranch was officially debt-free. Margaret Montgomery, now Margaret Williams after taking back her maiden name, served as the program's director. The divorce had been brutal but liberating. She'd discovered strength she never knew she had, channeling 20 years of pain into fierce advocacy for abuse survivors. As Ethan approached the podium, his speech cards trembled in his hands. He was 13 now, his voice beginning to crack with adolescence, but his presence commanded respect earned through trials no child should face. "My father once told me," Ethan began, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd, "that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right, despite being terrified." Kaiser taught me the same lesson without words. We were both broken by the same man, both lost in our pain. But together, we found something stronger than fear or anger. We found purpose. He looked at Ellen, whose smile gave him strength to continue. This ranch was built on secrets and blood. Today we reclaim it for healing and hope. Every dog trained here, every child given a chance, every veteran who finds peace, they're all proof that our worst moments don't define us. Our choices after those moments do. Kaiser stood and pressed against Ethan's leg, sensing his emotion. In the crowd, Frank Rodriguez wiped his eyes, no longer ashamed of his tears. "Welcome to Redemption Ranch," Ethan concluded, "where broken souls come to heal, and where the love between a boy and a dog sparked a revolution of hope." Dear friends, as we close Ethan and Kaiser's journey, I hope their story reminded you of life's most precious truth. It's never too late for redemption, never too late to heal old wounds, and never too late to transform pain into purpose. Many of us carry scars from battles fought long ago, whether from family betrayals, lost loved ones, or dreams that seem to slip through our fingers. But like Ellen, who at 70 found the strength to forgive the son who abandoned her, we too can choose grace over bitterness. Like Kaiser, who learned to trust again after years of abuse, we can open our hearts despite past hurts. This story isn't just about a boy and his dog. It's about the courage to stand up for what's right, even when our knees shake. It's about discovering that our greatest tragedies can become our most powerful testimonies. I'd love to hear from you. What moment in Ethan's journey touched your heart the most? Have you ever had an animal companion who helped you through a difficult time? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories inspire us all and remind us that we're never alone in our struggles.